The next interest rate announcement is scheduled for Thursday, with South Africans watching on nervously. Now, the Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee voted to keep interest rates on hold in July. That announcement came as a relief to many, particularly those with home mortgages. Now, South Africa's repurchase rate stands at 8.25%, with the prime lending rate at 11.75%. Now, we do have Tshepo Mongoai, who is our economics editor, joining us live now. Tshepo, we are biting our nails, we are crossing our fingers, we are, everyone is trying to make sure that whatever happens, we don't see an increase. What are the economists saying?
Well, I suppose with the previous decision, remember there were two members of the Monetary Policy Committee who I would say voted, or who opted for a hike. And the rest actually preferred the stance to leave it on hold. So I suppose, there is some work to do to convince the other members to think otherwise, and convince them that indeed we have reached the end of our tightening cycle. Inflation indeed is coming down, and there are signs that even the outlook, remember the concern is the outlook, is favorable towards lower inflation, despite the risk that have been mentioned. But the overall view in the market is that the interest rates will remain on hold for now. And then they will also assess the current and going forward some of the situations, particularly the risks that are building up. But the overall story in terms of data that came out is that of inflation that is coming down. However, if you look at the consumer price inflation forecast expected on Wednesday, economists are actually saying that it's possible that we could see inflation peaking at around 5%, some even above 5%. But we shouldn't be too concerned about that, because going into next year, we could see it going down to where the Reserve Bank preferred to be, around 4.5%. But the Reserve Bank is likely to take a very hawkish stance tomorrow. On Thursday, when they deliver the interest rates, simply because we still are facing some headwinds in terms of bringing inflation under control. When we look at the African countries, many of them are still battling with inflation. Many of them are facing double-digit inflation. Their interest rates, Nigeria at 18%, inflation at 24%. They are doing everything to bring inflation under control, but it's still extremely hard to bring it down. Egypt, it's also battling because the currency has been devalued. I suppose, like they say, that you really have to get your timing right. If you act too late, you lose the fight, and you find that inflation is just running away and is becoming generalized in the overall economy. But if you act slightly earlier, you'll be able to arrest it. And I think that's what the South African Reserve Bank has managed to do. Yes, it's not a perfect instrument. It's got its shortcomings. It cannot solve our problems. But if you look at the rest of the African countries, the challenges that they're facing when it comes to inflation, you'd be happy you live here.
And you think about Nigeria's problems also further compounded by that grid collapse, which a lot of us were watching, and, just concerned about what happens there. But there's another thing that you and I were talking about even off air, and it's certainly not making me happy, and I suppose chicken lovers as well are also just going to be, unfortunately, in a difficult position.
Well, I've been looking at a basket of my breakfast, and one is eggs, and if you look at cheese, for example, as well, growing at around 19%, and eggs, of course, we are dealing with the avian flu. Yes, if you look at the inflation, we have been coming down on the food inflation at 10%. But there are risks when you look at the avian flu. I know of one farmer in Welkom who has lost over 400,000 birds because the outbreak happened in one house and then it spread across the farm. So currently we are dealing with a very serious problem of this avian flu that's affecting chickens. One farmer said that they cannot find a day-old, chicken that are actually at the point of laying, because they would prefer to get chickens that are at the point of laying. They are not available in the country, and they need to produce eggs, and they can't find them. So they have to wait for the current stock to grow until they find them. So chances are, of course, demand is low in South Africa, but with the festive season approaching, it's going to pick up. And we know that we have stopped the imports of the Chinese cheap chicken from Brazil, and we're relying on the domestic market. And we are losing a lot of chicken because of the avian flu. So that is definitely going to push up the price of cheap protein in chicken that we've enjoyed for quite some time. And so eggs also will become very expensive. Stores are already battling to secure orders as we speak now. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge going into the festive season.
Tshepo, that's not good news for my breakfast, eh? It's really not good news, because we're thinking about what does this then mean, particularly when it comes to the prices. But thank you so much for that update, and one certainly hope that the picture improves, because a lot of people have their breakfast with eggs, and when demand is that high, it just makes you think about what will happen. That is Tshepo Mongoai, who is our economics editor.